Have you ever wondered how international economic operations work, how international payments are made, or what are the norms that regulate these payments, and what is the presence or the relation of the concept of public interest in international financial law and international economic transactions? Well, in these presentations, we're going to talk about all that. So my group is conformed by Laura Castro, Ivanna Arroyo, Juan Felipe Alonso, and me, Luis Felipe Castro. So in the first part, we're going to talk about international financial law. So in order to understand what does it refers or implies the concept of international financial law, we have to talk about the international financial system. The international financial system can be conceived as a complex phenomenon of different types of economic relations. These economic relations can imply cross-border movement of capital, the functioning of bank systems, the investments that enterprises made in other countries, the settlement of public debt, credit relations, etc. Now, the international financial law are basically the complex set of regulatory rules, standards, and best practices that regulate all these operations that are part of the financial system, the economic operations that I just mentioned. So therefore, in order to see if an operation is held legally or properly, we have to look at the international financial law and the norms or the provisions that it brings. We also have to mention the three key factors of international financial law, which are separation of powers, the regulatory market applicability, and finally, the enable functionality of all the financial economic system in the terms of the operations that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Now we're going to continue with the international payment systems. Continuing with the second part of the presentations, we're going to talk about the international payment systems. I'm going to start with the SWIFT. The SWIFT is probably the most commonly known and used international payment system worldwide. But the first question that arises is, what is SWIFT? Well, SWIFT is basically a vast messaging network that banks and other financial institutions use to send and receive information in a form that is secure and it's efficient and fast. And this information mostly refers to money transfer instructions. In this point, is very important to clear that SWIFT is not a financial institution. As I said, it's a messaging network that banks and financial institutions use in order to send and receive important information of the activities that they do in a daily basis worldwide. Therefore, SWIFT doesn't hold or transfer assets. It only is the messaging network that supports the transfer of information between banks worldwide. So how did SWIFT was created, or for what purpose? What is its usefulness? Well, basically, SWIFT was created in order to solve the common problem of how to communicate cross-border payments. In order to solve this issue, this matter, in the year 1973, a group of banks joined in order to create the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, known as SWIFT, which is headquartered in Belgium. The banks were 239 and came from 15 different countries. So how does the system was idealized or was intended for it to work? Well, the main components of the original services were a messaging platform, a computer system to validate and read messages, and a set of message standards. So the next question will be, what does the standards imply, these messaging standards? Well, the standards were developed basically to allow for a common understanding of the data across linguistic and system boundaries and to permit the seamless automated transmissions, receipt, and processing of communications exchange between users. In other words, SWIFT intended to create a common language between banks that talk different languages, meaning French, English, Spanish, Italian, for them to receive and send and process the information that refer to the services that they deliver. In this case, or most commonly known, financial payment instructions. Okay, so now that we understand what is the usefulness of SWIFT and what it is, we have now to see how does the SWIFT works. So SWIFT basically assigns each financial organization a unique code that has between 8 and 11 characters. But how does this code is assigned, or how do we know the code of a certain bank in which we intend to make a payment from a different country? Well, the code is assigned using the following criteria. The first 4 characters are the institute of the code. So each bank has a specific code that is given because they are part of the SWIFT system. But some banks, especially big banks, have offices in different countries and different cities. Therefore, it is very important to have the country code, which is the next 2 characters of the 8 to 11 digit code that I mentioned, that is known as the BIC, or bank identifier code, or the SWIFT code. So, as I said, the first 4 characters will be the institute code, the next 2 characters will be the ones of the country, and the next 2 characters will be the location or the code of the city where the bank is. This is the basic code, which is composed, as I said, of 8 digits. But some banks, especially big banks, add other last 3 characters, which is mostly used to assign codes to individual branches. So now let's see an example of how SWIFT works in order to understand it better. So let's suppose, for example, that I'm in Colombia and I want to make a transfer to a bank in Italy, specifically in Venice, for example. So I go, let's say, to Bancolombia, and as I said, I want to make a money transfer to Venice. Let's say that the bank is called UniCredit Bank, for example. So I will go into my bank, in this case Bancolombia. I go with the money and I will go with the SWIFT code. I will tell the person that delivers the service in the office that I want to make a broad transaction. So that person will ask me for the SWIFT code or the BIC. And when I give the SWIFT code that as I said it has between 8 and 11 characters, basically the Bancolombia will send a payment transfer SWIFT message to the bank in Venice over the SWIFT secure network. And when the bank in Venice receives the SWIFT message about the incoming payment, it will clear and credit the money to the Italian's friend's account, for example. So I hope that with all that I've said, you now understand what is SWIFT. But as the most important points I want to point out that SWIFT is not a financial institution, is basically a messaging network that banks and financial institutions use in order to receive and, and send important information, especially related with money transfer instructions, and it solves the problem of communicating cross-border payments. This is very important for the international commerce transactions, because if we didn't have a reliable, secure, and common system with a common language that allowed different banks to process the payments of different economic agents of different that are located in different parts of the world, basically the international commerce would not function because these transactions imply that there are cross-border payments, that there are cross-border transfers of resources in order to deliver and buy the goods and services that that are part of the international commerce and that allow us to satisfy our needs in a daily basis. Now my teammates are going to continue with the presentations of the other payment systems. Thank you very much.
After talking about SWIFT, it is time to introduce an alternative. So what is an IBAN number or IBAN international account? Introduced in 1997, an IBAN or international bank account number is a unique identifier for a bank account. Before its introduction, countries all had their own bank account formats, which led to errors and delays in cross-border transactions. As of 2020, already 79 countries use IBAN numbers to make international payments simpler. This more recent system was introduced to improve the verification of cross-border payments and reduce errors such as payment transfer delays, excessive bank fees, and rejected payments. The IBAN published by SWIFT provides the technical specifications of the national IBAN formats of countries using this banking standard. In that sense, what does an IBAN look like? As it appears here on the screen, all IBAN numbers follow the same format and are comprised by 34 alphanumerical characters. The first two are letters that indicate the country in which the account is located. The second two are called check digits, which means they're used for error detection. The third series of numbers are called BBAN, which is basic bank account numbers, as they can change depending on the country's standards. But they're composed mainly of bank code, branch location, and account number. One of the most beneficial traits of the IBAN is its traceability. Checking the validity of a bank detail is crucial to prevent bank transfer fraud and to building trusting business relationships. One way of making sure the IBAN you were provided is valid is by inputting it in an IBAN checker that will give you a response. But the next question is, what's the difference between an IBAN and a SWIFT? Both codes are the two internationally recognized methods to identify bank accounts and enable quick and accurate international transfers. The main difference between the two methods is that while the IBAN identifies a specific bank account, the SWIFT code identifies the bank or branch in which the account is held. In both cases, transfers can take up to 5 working days and are processed by intermediary banks to prevent transfer fraud. To avoid errors and frauds, and IBAN numbers contain more information about the money transfer operation, and that's why sometimes they're considered safer.
Our financial system was created by the American Bankers Association, ABA, in 1910, with the aim of identifying all banks in the United States and, in the first instance, facilitating the identification and classification of negotiable instruments. So, what is the ABA code and what is it for? The ABA routine number is a 9-digit code usually used in the United States that appears at the bottom of the negotiable instrument, such as checks, to identify the financial institution in which it was drawn. The ABA RTN is required for Federal Reserve banks to process funds transfers from Fedwire and the automated clearing house to direct deposits, bills, payments, and other automated transfers. And our routing number does not correspond to a particular type of account. And for this reason, it can be applied to current savings and other account types. Over the years, the number of our routing has changed for several reasons, including the Federal Reserve Board. The Magnetic Ink Character Recognition Code MICR was invented as a unique technology for processing checks. This code identifies the bank and branch involved in the transfer of funds. Thus, with the evolution of payment methods, the ABA code was adapted to serve as a transaction identifier code to indicate the banking institution from and to which the transfers and deposits are made. So, when you make a transaction to an American bank from any agency of any place in the world, you will be asked for the ABA code. What is the importance of ABA routing numbers? ABA numbers are essential for several reasons. First, the ABA routing numbers allow financial institutions to track the origin and destination of a money transfer to process it more efficiently. Second, it eliminates possible errors that can cause delays in the transfer. How is the ABA code structured? So, the ABA code is a 9-digit number that is structured as follows. The first 4 digits refer to the Federal Reserve routing system and identify the physical location of the bank. The 5th and 6th digits, these two numbers identify through which bank the transaction will be made. The 7th digit indicates which check processing center of the Federal Reserve was assigned to the bank. The 8th digit refers to the Federal Reserve district in which the bank is located, and the 9th digit is a control code or checksum that is calculated using the first 8 digits. So if the final result is not equal to the checksum number, the transaction is marked and redirected for manual processing. So this ensures that the transaction is not erroneously issued to another bank.
Now, having reviewed the three financial systems of international payment, their operations are important for the world economy, we will analyze if the public interest is present in these systems. First of all, it is important to make a final differentiation between these three financial systems. SWIFT or BIC is the identification code for banks, while the IBAN code is the one that identifies the international accounts of European banks, and the ABA code is the number that identifies American banks. So the question we have to answer are, why are these bank codes necessary to make an international transfer, and how will it affect the public interest? In order to understand, we will start by giving an example. In 2014, when Russia was under threat to disconnect it from SWIFT, it was estimated that it could reduce Russia's gross domestic product by 5% in a year. Russia's exclusion from SWIFT could have ramifications for other nations because Russia is a key energy provider for Europe, and countries rely on the SWIFT system to pay for fuel. Here is the key point, and that is that not only companies and individuals use these systems, but also public entities when negotiating with other countries the supply and goods and services. And let us remember that a country's economy is the basis for meeting the needs of its citizens. In this way, the public interest is what is pursued by a group of people, whether it is a community, society, regions, state, or a group of them. We say that it's usually accompanied by state action, since public institutions are the representative of citizens, and this is the most orderly and efficient way of pursuing actions for the benefit of all. Then we have that a result of a sanction such as the exclusion of 7 Russian banks from the SWIFT system significantly hits the country and its neighborhoods, who subsists from the gas supply. Although Russia has developed its own messaging systems in 2014, it is not viable to use it on a large scale because of the small number of users it has. Therefore, there is no alternative for the country. This example makes it very clear how a country's government decision and economic policies harm or benefit it internationally. Finally, we have that these tools are fundamental for international trade and to make transactions between countries since they are used by more than 10,000 financial institutions to send messages and payment orders. To dig deeper into numbers, it is estimated that approximately 42 million transactions were made every day in 2021.